Cooperation in the railways, where we have identified specific projects, and the two Chinese industrial parks in Gujarat and Maharashtra. I am pleased that the two chief ministers are here with me. Both leaders were very supportive about increased Chinese participation in our Make in India mission and infrastructure sector. In Shanghai tomorrow, we will see our 20 venture in the private sector take concrete shape. President Xi and Premier Li were very receptive to the specific concerns I had raised on our growing trade deficit. We look forward to early impact on the ground. We have agreed to create a high-level task force to develop a strategic roadmap to expand economic relations. It will cover a broad range of areas including infrastructure, IT, pharma, agriculture, and manufacturing. An area of high priority for us is people-to-people contacts. Indians and Chinese do not know each other well, much less understand each other. We have decided to take the relationship out of the narrow confine of governments in the national capitals to states, cities, and our people. For the first time, India has launched a state and provincial leaders forum with any country. This is consistent with my firm commitment to cooperative federalism in India. This is the year of India in China. The next one will be the year of China in India. This will expand tourism between our two countries. We are establishing a center for Gandhian and Indian studies in Shanghai, a yoga college in Kunming, and bilateral think tanks forum. The Nathula route for Indian pilgrims to visit Kailash Mansarovar will become operational in June. I want to thank China for that. Our decision to open a consulates in Chengdu and Chennai reflects growing mutual confidence and shared commitment to expand our relationship, make our relationship more broad-based and people-centric. Finally, we have many common global and regional interests. For example, we have shared interests in the outcome of the international climate change negotiations. We are both trying to strengthen regional connectivity. Terrorism is shared threat. Instability in West Asia matters to both of us. Peace and progress in Afghanistan benefits us both. I am confident that our international partnership will deepen. Today, we have signed over 20 agreements covering diverse areas of cooperation. This shows the depth and maturity of our relationship and the positive direction of our partnership. This has been a very productive and positive visit. I look forward to working with President Xi and Premier Li. I have welcomed President Xi's proposal to hold regular summits to realize our vision for the relationship. I have also invited Premier Li to visit India at an early date. I look forward to Shanghai tomorrow. Thank you. Thank you very much.
共建记者活动到此结束，谢谢两位总理，谢谢大家。
All right, so that joint statement has now come to an end. Prime Minister Narendra Modi making a number of crucial points there. Let me get in, Mr. Joshi, you were taking down notes. What, according to you, is the main highlight of what the Prime Minister has said? And then we'll talk about the Chinese Premier as well.
You know, I think Shekhar will bear me out, but it's quite rare for a Prime Minister to stand up at the press thing in another country and say, I've asked this country to take a long-term strategic view of our relationship and to reconsider issues which are creating problems in our relationship. You know, so I think that it was a fairly blunt kind of a point that has been made to China. The hints are obvious. I mean, see, you know, we have problems with regard to Pakistan. We have problems with regard to the border. So basically what he's turning Xi Jinping's own concept of great power, new type of great power relations. Because Xi Jinping had given this call for a new type of great power relations where he said that countries must take into account each other's core interests. So I think what Modi is saying is that we also have core interests. And we want China to look into these core interests. So I think that was, to my mind, extremely significant. But I defer to Shekhar on this. He is the expert here.
What would your view be?
Let me add that the takeaway from what he said, the Prime Minister, is firstly the range of issues covered on which there was progress is very considerable. So it's a large package that we have. He didn't spell out the details in many cases, and obviously we'll have to wait and see what transpires in practice. But he did mention, for example, that this visa issue he had raised and so on, and that we are expecting progress on that. In the context of this stapled visa thing, that's certainly important. There was a clear hint also that we can expect some progress on CBMs and on the line of actual control issue, the clarification of that. So we'll see. But the important thing is the range of issues on which agreements have been reached. The number of agreements is substantive. And therefore, I think, we can certainly say that this has been a very successful visit.
Which the Prime Minister also mentions.
Which he mentioned, and it's very important that the Chinese side suggested, and this is an excellent suggestion, that these summit visits should now become, a regular feature, that they should take place with greater frequency. And obviously, we are in agreement with that.
Okay. Let's quickly go across to Beijing at this moment. Smita Sharma is now joining us. Now, Smita, we have received a tweet, and this government believes a lot in communicating using these social media platforms. The MEA spokesperson has said, quoting Narendra Modi, that on the boundary question, we agreed that we continue to explore a fair, reasonable and mutually acceptable resolution. So, a whole host of issues have been discussed, they have been talked about, and they are exploring fair, reasonable, mutually acceptable resolutions. What really more can we expect along these specific lines, particularly on the boundary issue?
Sanket, first, of course, let me tell you that, as you mentioned, that this is a tweet that has been put out. Unfortunately, we here cannot access neither Twitter nor Facebook. All the social sites are blocked. So I get to hear from you. But yes, as far as this boundary issue is concerned, or the other issues, I just heard, in fact, I think some expert in the studio mentioned that a whole range of issues have been discussed. Rightly so. But having said that, I also think that, there's not really much of a new takeaway that I found in these press statements so far between Mr. Li Keqiang and Prime Minister Narendra Modi. More or less everything was along the same lines as we had heard during that September visit when Mr. Xi Jinping was in Delhi, because from trade to, of course, staple visas issue, Mr. Modi in his remarks, in fact, did not mention staple visas as such, but he did say that our relationship is a complex one and there is a responsibility on both the countries to try and convert this complexity into strength for each other and a good force for the world, and also urge the Chinese side to really, in a way, try and ensure that all these issues that trouble smooth communication should be resolved. So he was referring perhaps to these issues of staple visas, which we do know for sure that was raised in that meeting with Xi Jinping yesterday and also in the structured dialogue today. But more than that, there's not really that has come out. The one important development is, yes, that opening, the additional opening, of course, of consulates in Chennai and Chengdu by both sides. So the more consulates you have, one would expect that perhaps this is a sign of growing trade, of the hope and expectation that more Chinese citizens will be coming into India and vice versa as well. But on terror, there was just that one line reference which says that terror is a shared threat, that stability and prosperity in Afghanistan is of mutual concern to both countries, and both have interest, of course, in that international climate conference coming up in Paris later this year. So more or less, I think the remarks, to me at least, over, and it's not just about Mr. Modi's last meeting with Mr. Xi Jinping. Whatever we have heard on the boundary so far, and expecting more mechanisms to come up, is something that we have heard even during the 2 terms of the UPA as well.
Absolutely. A lot is supposed to be read in between the lines as to what actually was discussed. Professor Deepak, before I come across to you, let me quickly show to our viewers at this moment, if the camera could zoom in. This is a tweet from the Ministry of External Affairs spokesperson. He actually tweets a page of all the agreements. We'll quickly zoom into that particular shot. This is a whole page of the agreements that have been signed in great detail, perhaps to send out a message. This is an amazing tool that this government is using rather effectively, Professor Deepak, where you have got 24 agreements and in great detail what those agreements are, what those memorandum of understanding are, who is it signed between, who are the signatories, and how is it going to benefit. All that has been listed out for the people to read and see, and then perhaps draw their own conclusion.
Right. I think this is very effective mechanism, to communicate with your people, and it is there for you to judge the takeaway from the visit. I think I'll flag out 3 things which Prime Minister Modi said. So one is he considered this one of the most important strategic partnership. This is very clear, and I think India and China both are nurturing and going towards that direction. So this is very, very important, implying that we are taking note of the big picture. And second thing, again, I agree with my co-panelist, Manoj, that Prime Minister Modi, he was extremely blunt when he said that he asked China that there is a need to reconsider its approach towards certain issues. And certain issues, of course, in bilateral context as well as a regional context, both, people have been talking about this $46 billion, Chinese investment in China-Pakistan economic corridor.
Right.
And third thing, I think this is also important. I think this is also vis-a-vis the structural problem we have in this country. For example, the investment parks which are coming up in Ahmedabad and Pune, we have not been able to procure land for that. Only 25% in the case of Ahmedabad and 1/5 in the case of Pune. So therefore, Prime Minister Modi in his statement pointed out that a task force has been built. There would be a task force to look into infrastructural issues, whether they are pharmaceutical issues, our market access to China into the Chinese market, and also the Make in India program, where we could see the Chinese investment in India. Also the agriculture sector, which was totally left out. I think these 3-4 areas, I see the area of cooperation in future, where we would be inviting Chinese investment, and through Chinese investment and through market access, bringing down this trade deficit.
Absolutely.
Between the two countries.
That is one crucial aspect as far as that particular joint statement is concerned. Rahul Kamal now joins us live. Rahul, I don't know whether you could hear what was actually being said in that joint statement. Apart from those deals that were inked, 24 of them in all, the other crucial aspect, number one, was how Modi quite directly told, in his discussions, and he even stated that at the press conference, that regional interests or India's interests must be protected. Apart from that, an acknowledgement on the trade deficit. And that is something which even the Chinese premier acknowledged. So the point that you were making for the past 2 days, that acknowledgement has come from China on the trade deficit, which is a major cause of concern for Indians.
Sanket, one of the most important highlights of Modi's foreign policy has been that he's been very forthright with world leaders. We saw this even earlier when he made a direct mention of the border incursion that had happened when the Prime Minister and he were swinging by the sides of the Sabarmati last year. Now again talking about certain problems. He didn't spell them out in public, but in private we're told he did elaborate on what the specific issues he believed were, which needed to be resolved by the Chinese side. So it's not as if he's skirting around these issues. It's not as if he's pretending that they don't exist or hiding them under a carpet. He's taking them up forcefully and also holding out a carrot for the Chinese, saying that, I know that you want fast, high-speed rail corridors in India. I know that you want your telecom companies to be allowed in. But this is what holds back the Indian system from being able to give you that access. Let's sit, let's resolve the border row. If we are able to make forward movement and if we're able to have a peace and tranquil border, I will be able to give you what you want. So I think that's the carrot that's now being held out. Remember, China is currently at a state in its economic growth where the speed of growth annually is coming down. India has just overtaken China to become the world's fastest growing economy. In such a situation, China has excess capacity in different sectors. So bait that's being held out by the Indian Prime Minister, suggesting to the Chinese that if we can resolve the border dispute, we can work together as two countries. Now the key question is, will the Chinese be prepared to do so, or will they continue to allow the problems to fester, as has been the case over the past 4 decades? They've discussed the crucial issues. It's not as if the crucial issues have been held back, even when it came to the Pakistan investments in the POK area that China is doing. Those two were mentioned. That's been a big bugbear from India's perspective. So, and as I said this morning, there won't be any big transformational breakthrough idea. If that's what you're expecting, you're likely to be disappointed. But there are these 24 agreements, bits and pieces, which seek to take the two nations forward on a path of peace and reconciliation while leaving the disputes on the side and hoping to be able to deal with them on a later date.
Absolutely, Rahul. Do stay on with us. We also have Smita Sharma joining us at this moment. She also has with her the India Today Beijing correspondent Anant Krishnan. Smita, it's over to you.
Thank you, Sanket. In fact, I'm also joined by Suhasini Head, the diplomatic editor for The Hindu, and Anant, of course, who has been in China for a pretty long time now. We sometimes suspect he might just be given an honorary citizenship. But Anant, going by, first of all, focusing on the agreements, 24 agreements worth $10 billion US. But when you look at the scale of the relationship between India and China, 10 billion USD doesn't really amount to much.
No, I think as for the actual amount of the deals, we'll have to wait till tomorrow when it's fleshed out between the companies. The business-to-business agreements will be released in Shanghai tomorrow. As for the 24 agreements that came out today, I think I'd highlight the new consulates that are going to be set up in Chennai, in Tamil Nadu, and in Chengdu in Sichuan province, because this is something that was actually held up for the last 4 to 5 years. They've been talking about it for the longest time. So I think finally there's some headway, and I think it's pretty important. I wouldn't sort of underestimate the importance of having, greater diplomatic presence in both countries. There are also two interesting agreements on cooperation in space and in ocean science. So these are two areas that have been a source of some mistrust. But I think we have to wait to see, the actual content of these agreements.
But in terms of the river data share.
CPFFC, Madam Li Keqiang, Honorable Chief Ministers, Governors and Mayors. This is a historic moment in the relationship between India and China. Today, we are launching a new vehicle for advancing cooperation between our two countries. In times to come, this will become one of the most important instruments for deepening our economic partnership and contact between our people. As someone who has been Chief Minister for 13 years and Prime Minister for one, this forum has a special place in my heart. But it is not just my sentiments that lead me to give such importance to this new institution. It comes from the series of conviction born from my experience that states have a vital role to play in the national development. This is especially true for large and populous countries with a high degree of geographical, social and economic diversity. It becomes even more relevant when the constitutional and political systems are in federal in structure. These attributes exist in both India and China, the world's two most populous nations. In India's constitution, state governments have predominant role in economic and social development. The central government creates the macroeconomic environment. It can set the broad social and economic agenda and directions for the nation. It can launch development policies and schemes. It can manage resources. But in the end, the state governments have an important role in their implementation. But as I saw, in my own experience, state governments can take innumerable initiatives for the development of the states. That is the level of autonomy and responsibility that they enjoy under our Constitution. In the same national environment, states are performing at different levels. For business investors too, whether they are Indian or foreign, their journey may begin in Delhi, but their success ultimately depends on state capitals. Many of the critical requirements for success, infrastructure, land utilities, skilled human resources, and many approvals ultimately depend on the state governments. But for me, the involvement of states in our national efforts is not just because of their constitutional and legal responsibilities. It is also stems from a basic management principle. The chances of successes are higher when we create a sense of participation for everyone. When we give everyone a stake in success. That is why I speak of Team India. That is why I believe that the foundation for India's development will not be the single pillar of the central government, but 30 pillars comprising the central government and all our states. It follows from the simple logic of science that this foundation will be stronger and more stable. It can support a much taller structure of development. That is why I speak of cooperative federalism when the center and the states are partners. I also speak of cooperative and competitive federalism in which states compete with each other to attract investments and jobs. We have moved quickly in the past year to give shape to this vision. When we replace the old Planning Commission with the institution called Niti Aayog, we gave a formal place and role for state governments in an institution of this nature for the first time in India. We have radically increased the amount of resources that the central government must transfer to the state governments. And when we began to raise large revenues from the auction of our coal, it also filled the coffers of the states where the mines are located. I am asking my ministers to move conferences out of Delhi to state capitals and other cities so that they do get the benefits that come from hosting such events. More than anything else, we deal with the state governments in a spirit of partnership and with sensitivity to their concerns. And in doing so, we do not look at the symbol of the political party that is in power in the state. Which is why, when I invited state governments to participate in this event, did consider the linkages of the states with China, but also broader political representation. Every nation needs strong international partnerships for its progress. The linkage has deepened in an integrated world. As international partnership in trade, investments, innovation, technology, tourism, education, skills, and health grow, state governments have a stake in them and responsibility for their success. I have found both through outbound and inbound state delegations that state-level infrastructure can be often more focused and productive. A number of decisions can be taken quickly by the state governments. These interactions also make the state governments more sensitive and aware of the international dynamics and requirements. Therefore, I attach great significance to this forum. It is the first that India has with any country, and it is appropriate that it has started with China. We are two of the world's largest economies and among its fastest growing major economies. We have enormous economic synergies. We also face similar challenges. We have some similar experiences. We have both seen differences in the pace of development in different parts of our countries. Our economic relations are growing rapidly. During President Xi's visit last year, we set for ourselves an ambitious plan to take our